everybody, to the first and official episode of The Volt. And I have my dear friend here, John Kollhoff. How's your day going?
It's great. Good morning.
Going great. What's one thing that people get kind of like misinterpreted about trying to start a business, do you think? Like something that you kind of hear from people and it's not necessarily like right.
I think there's a lot of ways to start a business. And I think everybody kind of has their own approach to it. I think some people will jump in too fast before they get a business plan. And then other people worry about all the details before they ever start, so they never start a business. So I think kind of maybe the right answer is somewhere in between. Like, don't be afraid to try something. Maybe it's just like a proof of concept to get things going. But then before you roll it out to the whole world, make sure you got a solid business plan and have thought about all the details in there.
Yeah.
What do you think? Where do you see people?
Well, I'd say from my personal opinion, from like my own experience, is like I kind of want to calculate everything before doing something, and I think that sometimes can be to my default. So like instead of learning like a few things and then trying to seek it out, it's like I want to calculate every precise little thing. So kind of like what you were saying, they don't start a business because they want to try to do all the puzzle without figuring out what puzzle pieces to even know to learn.
Kind of like the perfect is the enemy of the good enough.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's 100 or a million great business ideas that never got started because somebody couldn't figure out all the details before they got started.
Yeah. What drew you originally to like wanting to have your own business?
So my first business was really pharmacy, and I was fortunate in my first year of pharmacy school even really before my first year of pharmacy school, to be involved with another business owner, with an independent pharmacy owner in my hometown. And then when I got into pharmacy school, I was fortunate, it was right after 9/11, and basically went to this national conference, and like 80% of the attendees had not shown up just because they weren't flying or whatever. And so I had the benefit of being one of a handful of students with some of the best independent pharmacy ownership in the country. So all the leadership came, and then basically just the people who were really committed to independent pharmacy and pharmacy ownership came to this meeting. And so it was basically just like it was almost a one-on-one type of situation for any of the students who showed up. So I think that was really transformative. That was a really cool experience.
Yeah. What kind of like drew you to pharmacy? Like what made you want to pursue that versus the millions of things that someone could do at a young age starting out?
I had one of my best friends from high schools, and he was actually my scout leader. His dad, the dad was a scout leader. The other guy was in my class, but he worked at the pharmacy, and we just had a really good pharmacy in our town. He was really involved, really supported all the schools, supported all the causes. So that was kind of cool, just to have as a mentor and a role model. And I kind of wanted to do something medical, but I'm still a little squeamish. I don't want to be poking around in people's bodies. So
yeah.
This is kind of I don't know, medical adjacent without getting into the blood and guts type of stuff.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how I came to it. But then obviously knowing the pharmacist in town and what he had done for the community was really helpful too.
Yeah. It seems like it's like someone that you can kind of rely on when you don't know, maybe what's going on with your own body. It's someone that can help you fix something internally or mentally, maybe even physically.
Yeah, pharmacists have a lot of knowledge. In fact, it's not really a joke, but it's true. Pharmacy students have something like 6 semesters of pharmacology, and doctors have 1. So when it comes to knowing about drugs, I think pharmacists we really are the experts. And so just kind of depending on the different courses that people take. I know one of the focuses I had was more on like um, something that's kind of the terminology's changed a little bit, but functional medicine, or giving your body medicine or vitamins, supplements that help your body work the way that it was intended to work. Kind of like any machinery. If you take out one part, the whole machine won't work. So just making sure all the parts of your machine are working well. So that was something that I kind of focused on. There's other people who obviously they'll focus on oncology or hematology. There's just all sorts of different specialties. Obviously within pharmacy, once you get out of kind of the retail realm, compounding is another huge thing that we do. So um, compounding like the semaglutide now for weight loss through our pharmacy, and just 100 other things, whether it's for humans or animals. There's just kind of a lot of things that are kind of unique and exciting about that.
What's your personal opinion on the semaglutide for people who lose weight?
Um, I've thought about that. I'm not. I'm just not sure right now. I think obviously for people who need to lose weight, it's a good tool to have. I just feel like there's so much stress that can be put on your body just by carrying those extra pounds. So it'd be interesting to see kind of long term what those results are,
Yeah.
and see. My guess is that there's going to be some unintended consequences, unintended side effects from people using that long term. But at this point, I don't know. And maybe it's just something at some point everybody needs to take. It's kind of designed to mimic something that naturally occurs in your body, and so it's possible that just the way that we've evolved, obviously with essentially more calories and we know what to do with everywhere we turn, maybe our bodies haven't evolved as fast as our food system has. So it's possible that the semaglutide might help us catch up. Or
From my understanding, it seems like it helps regulate the insulin.
yeah, so the whole class is called GLPs, glucagon-like peptides, and so it kind of works kind of in the same sugar regulation system as the insulin does.
Yeah, me personally, I'm kind of like you've told me before, I'm like an intense person, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
So me, I don't personally like stuff like that, but I get it if like I'm kind of like a mix of both worlds, where I'm like, okay, I guess if someone needs that to like simply get started and like kind of get the ball rolling, I guess like kind of get the snowball packed.
Mm.
But for like someone like me, I know that if I find like an easy way to do it, I'll kind of like rely on it versus like my own self. Like I just simply need to eat better and be a little bit more strict with my own choices versus kind of relying on something else.
Yeah, again, that's something else I've thought about, and I don't know what the truth is, but like with diabetes or like type 1 diabetes, people don't make insulin, so I think it's probably just as likely that there are people who either don't make that natural GLP, or they don't make enough of it,
Yeah.
or there's some other receptor type of defect where it doesn't have the same effect in every person. So I could, I just kind of as I think about that from a 10,000 foot view, like that makes sense to me that there's people that there's 100 other diseases where people don't make enough of an enzyme or a neurotransmitter or something like that. So it's not crazy to me that people wouldn't be making enough of the natural GLP. And so I think that from that perspective, it's natural to supplement it. Testosterone is another thing, right? Like as people age, your body naturally makes less testosterone. So that's something that I think it's probably reasonable to supplement with, because you're really just kind of replacing your testosterone kind of to the level where you're at your most vital. So
Yeah. One thing I like to kind of do is like I like to question things instead of just kind of like when someone tells me something, I'm like, like I kind of take everything as a grain of salt,
mm-hmm.
and like I like to like really dissect and try and study things. And like one thing I've kind of fallen into is learning about like genes specifically. Yeah. Like they say that everyone's body's different, but like no one really knows as of why. But like say you have a gene that doesn't allow you to process something, so then maybe you need a supplement, or like it doesn't allow their body to methylate a certain vitamin.
Yeah, that's really well documented.
And like one thing that was always interesting to me is like some people say like alcoholics or whatever. It kind of like runs in our family or stuff like that. But if you ask someone like, well, what gene is that? Like they can't tell you like, well, this is the gene. But maybe there's a gene that be like, if you have this in your diet or certain things, it'll cause other things to happen within the body to for you to kind of like rely on something or be kind of more dependent upon looking for an out, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I kind of agree with you. Like, I think though, just because we don't know where the gene is doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And for something, alcoholism obviously is probably a little bit more complex than just a single, a single gene.
Yeah.
But I think that there's, one of the things actually that we compound is naltrexone, which is very similar to naloxone, which is what they use to reverse like opioid overdoses.
Mm-hmm.
But they have found that people who take low doses of naltrexone can actually like have less of an urge to drink. There's other kind of effects that it seems to have on even like the immune system. But yeah, I think I understand what you're saying on just kind of looking for. It's almost like looking for an excuse, like, oh, that's not my fault, it's genetic, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I think what history will show you is that if you have bad genes, you can't have bad habits, and that a lot of times good habits can cover up for bad genes.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes they can't. But I think that that's something that I think I understand what you're saying. Like, I don't think that you should be using any of those as a crutch, like,
Yeah.
or even say like, oh, it runs in my family, I can't help it.
Yeah, it's kind of
Look who's talking here.
yeah. I like to call it like the monkey see, monkey do law. A lot of people don't realize like as of why a lot of the decisions and things that they do in life is like it is their decision to make, but they grew up seeing that habit or they grew up hearing about it a lot or it seems like it's kind of like something that's like there but they don't ever really like think about it.
What one habit do you think that, let's say, the United States needs to break right now?
Break.
Yeah, if the United States had one habit that they could, like, as a country, break, what would it be?
Excuses. Excuses would be my thing that I would say because it seems like everyone like no matter what it is, any situation, someone's like, well, this happened instead of being like for me, for instance, if I went out to the bar and I got in a fight with someone over something stupid, I could be like, well, this person was acting dumb, or I could just simply be like, hey, I was in an environment where that could likely happen, and accept the
Also, I
my
punched him in the face.
yeah. I could also accept that I put myself in a situation where the chances of that happening is more likely because when people are intoxicated, things aren't going quite the way they normally do.
Right.
So instead of taking like self accountability as in maybe it's because I put myself in the environment where that can likely happen, they're like, well, this person did this, which is true, but also at the same time, you put yourself in an area where it can happen more likely.
Yeah.
Being more self aware of, like, just taking more self blame for anything and everything that happens. Because if you give something else the power of,
I think there was a lot of that, I'd say, lack of self awareness and not being in touch, and I think that kind of leads to lots of other things too, like whether it's just again not taking responsibility for your own actions. I feel like that's kind of a curse.
yeah. Well, like one thing that like I realized, especially when I first started like trying to lose weight, was it's like I'm just like not motivated, and what I realized is like motivation is a byproduct of discipline. So it's almost like a momentum tool.
Sure.
Because it's very rare that I'll be super motivated and I just go do something. I'm like, yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
It's like super unreliable, and like that's the number one thing I hear from people when I talk about like, hey, like what's your fitness goal? Like, where are you trying to get? And they're like, well, this is my goal, but this is what's kind of happening. I'm just like not really motivated, and what they don't realize is like motivation's not reliable at all. Because if you only do something when you're motivated, then you're not really gonna probably do it very often, if ever.
Do you want to talk about that? I obviously have heard you've told me about your weight loss thing, but that was really before I knew you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about that, or?
Yeah, I'm completely open. Back in 2020, I was at 289 pounds. My head was in the shape of like a bowling ball. Like I didn't even realize I was like that bad off, and I found myself like I knew I was overweight, but I didn't realize how much I was overweight. It's like I'm fairly tall, so like I can kind of hide it a little bit better than some people can.
Right.
Um, but I was like, man, I'd like to kind of lose weight. And like I did weights and stuff in school, but I've never been a runner. Always hated running. It was like last resort. I'd almost rather just not do anything
I'll just die.
than never run. Yeah. And I always had like an excuse, like to always find a way to like just not push myself. Like it was like kind of back to the like accountability of like just being self-aware of my own decisions. Like some people say, well, I don't run because I'm fat. And I'm like, well, or you could look at it the other way and say I'm fat because I don't run. Now, both terms could technically be correct, but if you work towards running, like the saying, if you can't sprint, jog. If you can't jog, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. So you might not be able to sprint right now, but you can at least crawl until you can then maybe gain enough strength to walk, and then maybe a little light jog or a little shuffle, and then slowly work your way up. And that was that was my biggest thing. Was like when I first started, I couldn't even run a full block, and my running was probably extremely slow. If I'm being honest.
Like one side of a block or a real block?
No, like just one side of the block. Like I'd get like halfway down a block, and like I'd be so winded, my knees would hurt, my shins are like feeling like they're just gonna fall apart. And I'm like, I can't even go an entire block distance. Like I was so pissed at myself. I was like extremely mad. Went home, of course, then went and ate my Sonic because I'm just like, well, I can't even do it. Like I can't. Like I had no self belief, and then, but it was like back to waking up, and it's like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. Though, like it was like this.
You know that what your behavior, you're not going to get the results you want with the behavior that you
Yeah,
have.
100%. And I had like this mentality of like a person who's great, but like my body did not match. And I'm like, how is someone else supposed to believe in me and look at me as the way I perceive myself when my habits and my body doesn't match like what I think I perceive myself as? And so I was like, I kind of wanted others to perceive me as the way that I perceive myself. And it was just knowing that like the way I looked at myself versus my actual habits and my actions were not matching what I was thinking in my head. I was like, I'm just not being real with myself. And so I couldn't run, so I just started walking a lot. I'd walk with a sauna suit on and a backpack with a protein jug full of water, so I'd have a little bit of weight, and I'd just walk around town. And so I couldn't run at all, so I just walked. And then I always felt like, I don't know, I've been in drunken fights before, and I knew that's not the same as if like a dangerous person, like a violent person per se, in public wasn't the same as like a drunken fight between two friends. And I was like, I want to be able to defend myself like better. Like I want to actually know how to fight.
So all your fights were with friends, is what I'm hearing.
For the most part, yeah.
Okay.
For the most part. There's a few that weren't, but I was just like, I want to be more confident in like being able to just like know who I am. Whatever happens, I can take care of like whatever comes my way.
Yeah.
And there was a gym here in town. It's no longer here, of course, but so I started going to boxing and jiu-jitsu and then kickboxing. And I was riding my bike to and from that each and every day, which was 2 miles there, 2 miles back. and then of course all the exercising for a total of like 4 hours at the gym, um, and then to and from work on a bicycle, which was 2.1 miles one way and then 2.1 miles back. So I was doing about 8 miles, a little bit over 8 miles each and every day on my bike. So I was doing like tons of cardio, which I couldn't really run because like my legs were just, it hurt so bad to run. So I was like, well, I can at least ride my bike. Like that doesn't kill me. Like my legs would be pretty sore, but
Mm-hmm.
um, simply trying to eat less was my hardest part. Like I didn't have a problem with eating healthy, but eating less was my biggest problem. So like I was, of course, I was eating really crappy food. Like I'd go to Sonic, I'd get a double bacon cheeseburger, a large fryer, large tater tot, two soft pretzel twists with cheese, a breakfast burrito, and a large drink, and like that would be my meal.
That's your 4,000 calories for the day.
Yeah, and I'd do that 2 or 3 times in one day. Like I was eating an absurd amount of food, and like I don't know, it just became normal
It's
to
kind of
me.
the habit. Yeah.
Yeah, it just became super normal. So I started eating less, but I was still kind of eating crappy food. But then I was finding myself always hungry. And I don't know if my theory is correct here, but it seems like when I'm eating the right foods, I don't get as hungry.
Yeah.
Like, so I could eat the same exact amount of calories eating crappy food as I could eating healthy food. When I'm eating crappy food, I'm super hungry, and I think it's because the human body's like, yeah, we had calories, but we don't have the nutrition that we need. So it's like we need.
It's trying to get the nutrition, and it's like we know that when you put stuff in your face, you get some nutrition.
Yeah. Yep.
You're not going to get the right stuff. Yeah. I was just talking with someone about this. This is something that just blows my mind. Like, arguably, we're the most advanced people on the planet, right? Most advanced organism on the planet. But you can put free choice minerals out for a cow, and the cow will only eat calcium if it needs calcium,
Yeah.
and it'll only eat sodium if it needs sodium. It just ignores the other stuff. And kind of the same way they eat food. They don't eat food that they don't need. Um, they don't eat plants that are going to disagree with them, and like that's just part of being a cow.
Yeah.
And like I have to think that if we were in touch with our guts and our consumption, I feel like maybe that's kind of part of the industrialization of food is that they take you away from put up barriers between normal food and how you interact with it by artificial sweeteners and everything else. So I just think that's wild that humans as a species are so out of touch with their diets when cows, which I don't think anybody's ever thought might be the smartest animals on the planet, only eat exactly what they need when they need it.
And like one thing is like super funny is even though humans are extremely smart, we're also dumb to a default because like we see ourselves as something else, but we're actually a part of nature. Like we see ourselves as humans living in nature, but actually we're just still a part of nature. And it seems like especially when humans try to go against the natural ways of how nature and just life goes, it seems to really always go screwy.
Yeah, it doesn't seem crazy to me that we think that, right? Like I'm in this house that's it's covered in drywall and wood and then concrete on the outside. I think that's probably like not a crazy way for a person to think that they're not part of nature. Especially when you look at a big city where everybody's living in concrete and steel skyscrapers. Like,
Yeah.
Are you really part of nature at that point? I mean, obviously there's an interaction, but then your interaction with nature, you're living in basically just a concrete forest.
Yeah.
How many people who live in that environment are like truly interacting with nature outside of flies and mosquitoes?
Yeah. And like especially like we've come so far from like where humans used to be, way back in the day, to where like grounding, for instance, like some people think that that's kind of like a voodoo science, but there's like actual like scientific proof. Like you can, like as soon as you put your feet on the earth, like you instantly discharge of like the negative like energy ions or whatever you want to call it. And then like if you take your blood before you ground, it'll be thicker and just kind of
We're gonna do that right now.
goopy.
You're gonna take some blood.
We could, we could. And then after you ground for 3 minutes, you can take your blood again, and you'll see like a huge change. It causes all the red blood cells to separate and not be stuck together, clumped together. But we're electrical beings, and people don't really see it that way. But we're touching and in touch with a lot of things throughout the day that are like a different currency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah. But like back to me when I was losing weight, it was like realizing I felt like I was starting off from ground one. Like I felt like I didn't have any knowledge of like how to lose this weight. I was like, I know I need to eat less, and I know I need to just simply do more.
Mm-hmm.
It's not be more active, but then like studying, I don't know, it seems like there's a million ways. There's this diet, there's that diet, there's this exercise, there's that one. And I think we kind of can overcomplicate how the body just simply works, because you hear like the term a lot of people use is like gym bro science. And they're like, well, if you do it this way, you know, it'll work better.
Yeah.
Like there's fitness influencers that aren't doing it naturally, and they're like, well, this is how I do it, and like it's this simple. I'm like, well, yeah, but your body is
You're also juiced.
your body's repairing itself at an extremely high rate compared to the person that's natural, where their body is not going to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't. You can't apply this to that because it's not the same thing.
I kind of think so with the gym bro science. I kind of feel like I'm gonna go back to my cows, right? And we were talking about just how everybody's basically different. I have to feel that some of that gym bro science is, you know, you or me being in touch with who we are and what works for us, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel like that might be like maybe we're getting closer, but again, then I think the fallacy is assuming that what works for me is going to work for you, right? And so I think obviously there's a lot of wackos on the gym bros, the gym bros, but I do feel like some of that stuff is like, yeah, that makes sense. Like that makes sense that it would work for someone.
Yeah.
Like it might not work for me, it might not work for you, but obviously, you know, assuming the guy's not also hitting the juice, like if that's what's working for him, you know, that's his truth, right? Like there's probably, you know, 1 out of 100 people that'll be perfect for.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm kind of curious to see, you know, how we advance. I think as we kind of learn more about those genes and really how they work, and unfortunately, it's not like an on-off switch, right? The light's either on or it's off. It's a huge web of interactions with lots of other genes. You know, metabolic, food-based. You know, what triggers are being turned on and off by the food we eat. I'm curious to see how much more we learn about the human body. I mean, I think there was this really cool study. It's probably been 5 or so years ago, but they took like basically a bunch of different carbs, and I can't remember how many people were in the study, but the results that I remember were just amazing. So you think about like pure carbohydrates, so like they had like rice, soda, ice cream, and they would feed these to different people, and then they would check their blood sugar and their insulin. Like, just was their body producing insulin? What was happening with their blood sugar? And for certain people, rice would make their blood sugar spike, and for other people, it wouldn't at all.
Mm-hmm.
And in those same people where the rice spiked their blood sugar, ice cream wouldn't spike their blood sugar, or soda wouldn't spike their blood sugar. And it's just kind of, I mean, very, very telling of just how individual, you know, our gene makeup is for us. And I think that makes it, you know, absolutely vital that we figure that out. If you are interested in health, I mean, if you don't care, then, you know, keep eating whatever and see what happens. But if that is something that concerns you, I think it's important to know, you know, is eating rice, which is obviously it's pure carbohydrates. I don't know where everybody sits on that, but if you think that's the healthy thing for you, but it's also spiking your insulin, and then that insulin's dropping your blood sugar too low and then making you hungry again, so then you're overeating. you know, that may or may not be what's best for you.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be cool to kind of get an understanding of what foods do to our body.
Yeah, and that's what I've started to realize is like the difference between people's bodies, especially because there'll be people that will say vegan's the best way, and that's exactly how like it is for the human body. And then there will be like people like me, for instance. I'm like, I want to eat all meat. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
like eating meat. I feel good when I eat meat, and like I'm just like my sharpest when I'm eating nothing but meat for the most part. Like I'll have a little bit of cottage cheese or a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
milk or a little bit of cheese, peppers, onions, garlic. But other than that, I mean, I don't really eat outside that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think there's a lot of that too. That depends on your activity level.
Yeah.
Like I know that there's a couple of athletes that I follow that are pure vegan, and man, they just have to eat a ton of food. I mean, there's just not the same density, obviously, in fruits and vegetables as there is in meats and things like that. Obviously, a lot of those people are eating carbs too, but some of them aren't, and
Yeah.
so that just makes it, even harder. But I think the fats are really important too. So whether you're vegan or carnivore, I think it's important that you're getting those healthy fats. I think there's probably more evidence that our bodies need more fat than any other nutrient that we intake.
Yeah. Like one thing, like talking to people that I've realized, and like even what's helped me a lot is like say I want to get to like 185. It's a good goal, but like one thing that seems like a lot of people forget is to like write it down on the calendar, like time date, because I can say I want to be by 185 summertime. Summertime's a few months
It's almost
period,
here.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and uh, you could eat 100 calories less a day, and you'll eventually lose 1 pound in like a couple weeks. Or if you stay on like a 300 caloric deficit, then you'll get
Speed
one
that.
pound a week. Like you can almost calculate, and it's more visible to be like you're more on track with things versus I just want to be at 185. It's like okay, well we can get there, but we need a date, and some people don't ever think to put like a date to when they want to make it. They just want to get there, and without putting the date on there, like it's
there's no there's no finish line.
yeah. And another thing is like getting people to start to see that like see food as a source of fuel versus satisfaction, something to enjoy, which
Yeah.
is like one thing that I originally was like kind of fighting with because I was like, oh, this doesn't taste that good. Like, I don't want to eat this. But then, like, as soon as I started looking at it more as like, well, this is what my body needs, though, that like kind of flipped a switch where I'm like, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like, if I don't really care for it, like avocados. Actually, before you and I had ever been around each other, could never eat avocados. And then the one day you're telling me like how you were eating avocados, I'm like, man, I don't want an avocado. But one day I went to the grocery store. I was like, oh, I'll get one. So I got one, put some salt on it, and I was like, it's not that great, but it's doable.
Yeah.
And then like after like 2 years, I'm like, I actually like avocado now. So it's super weird how you can kind of like rewire your thinking into like liking a food when you know like the benefits of it, especially.
Yeah, I think there's some science behind that. I can't remember. Like one of the things that I don't go out of my way to eat them, but like as a kid, I absolutely hated tomatoes,
Mm-hmm.
and I have absolutely no idea why. I don't have any real reason for hating tomatoes, but like I like salsa. Obviously, every kid loves ketchup, but just I don't know if it was maybe like after I got my first job, like I think one of the pharmacists I worked with had a garden, so we always had tomatoes, and like I don't know if it took me like 3 or 4 times just like, eating them and like, oh, they're just, it's just a thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with them at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably true for most things. If you just eat it 4 or 5, 10 times, whatever it takes, like, eventually, like, oh, it's food and it's not really not that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, just simply like learning to eat the right foods too, because there's like so many people talk on like, oh, you can eat this protein bar or whatever, but there's like also a whole nother side of things of like all the oils and all the unnatural things that are in foods, even if it does say it's like healthy, like
Mm-hmm.
Quest chips or whatever. There's like soybean oil and sunflower seed oil and like all this other stuff that's like really not good for you. But
Yeah, I think the challenge with that stuff is that you don't always know what it is. You know what I mean? So I think that there's kind of depending on the processing and everything else that went into it. Like I probably feel like there's some soybean oil that could be pretty healthy for you. You know what I mean? But I think that that's probably not what's going to be in a processed food item. You're not going to get the healthy stuff in a, you know, whatever it is. And I think that that's like you mentioned, Quest bars or hopefully they don't sponsor. But, any of those things, like you know, they say like, oh, it's 20 or 30 grams of protein. Okay, that's also true, but is that being I mean, is the benefit of that protein being undone by the sugars or the oils that are causing inflammation and things like that? So
yeah, and is it bioavailable to that person too?
yeah,
So like
that's big.
some protein powders, like I've realized myself, like I'd try and I'd get like extremely bloated and like
Mm.
just have gas from it, and it's because like my body's not processing it because of however that protein's made in that
Yeah.
powder versus like a protein isolate, I believe is what it's called. I could be wrong, but
Well, I think that I mean what I've seen is that any like I don't think protein tastes good naturally, and so anytime they put it into a form where it tastes good,
yeah, like
that's when you start causing
like a
problems.
cookie crumble, and
Well, or even just just sweeteners, Splendas, and everything else that they put into food these days. Like I think that there's gosh, there's some real risks with knowing what's good for you, right? I mean, it's like, oh yeah, this tastes good. I can like, oh, this is a protein I can actually eat. Like, okay, well, it's got Splenda or it's got who knows what else in there that's causing inflammation in your body, or maybe the stuff isn't bioavailable. I actually haven't even really looked into any more of that.
one thing that is super interesting is like raw products, like all the regulations and rules on having like raw milk. Like some states you can't even get raw milk in.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I guess maybe I don't have a complete understanding of that, but my understanding is that there's like kind of like weird ways to like skirt the rules. Like so, if you have a dairy, they'll have like one cow, and you and I each buy half of it, and then we can go get the milk from our cow anytime we want.
Yeah.
So I think I've heard there's kind of like ways to skirt that. I'm just trying to think. There's a big case up in Vermont. It's somewhere in the Northeast where this guy is basically set up. It's basically just a co-op. So he has the dairy, but he doesn't own any of the cows. The cows belong to the people in the co-op, and they're using that to provide milk for the members of the co-op. And I think I don't know if it's the state or the USDA, but like he's had a lot of legal challenges with people trying to shut him down. I think that was maybe up in front of maybe a state Supreme Court or something very recently. That's something you should look into. I'll send you some details on that when I
Okay.
find them. There's somebody that I follow online that's um, really trying to shed light on that. I think people having, I don't know, being able to control their own food source is really important.
Yeah. One thing that to me it's kind of like if people okay, if there's a risk to drinking raw milk per se, like some people think that there is, then I don't know, have them put a warning label and say, hey, this could be the risk of having raw milk or whatever,
Yeah.
and still allowing people to buy raw milk. It's kind of like why aren't we allowed to kind of make our own decisions?
Yeah, like we get to well, we get to go get into a vehicle and drive 80 miles an hour down the interstate and potentially put ourselves in danger that way. I think on the raw milk thing specifically, I think that really it comes down to how they're making the milk, right? So if you were to get raw milk from anywhere that sells milk in a plastic jug, that's probably very, very risky because it's a very industrial way of raising cattle.
Mm-hmm.
and there's probably hundreds or thousands of them in those dairies that are making that, and then you've probably seen them on the highway, right? They take it from the dairy, they ship it who knows how far to a processing plant, and the processing plant ships it to another factory, and then the factory ships it to your grocery store. And so I would say, that process, that system really necessitates pasteurization and all the things that they've done to milk to make it shelf stable and available in your grocery store kind of on demand. But I think that, probably the way they're doing it up in the Northeast with this gentleman, if you go right to the right to the source and pick up fresh milk every day, what is the risk in that? I think that that's something that we as consumers need to understand. I, the Rumble thing is really interesting. I think if you look into that, when you look at the number of like markers of inflammation in the cows and the types of things that red blood cells, white blood cells, things that are associated with inflammation and infection, they're much higher in those industrial raised cattle than they are in, say, a family farm where somebody's got a small herd where they're milking them. So I think there's pretty good data on that.
Yeah, and it seems like there's good reasons behind a lot of things, but at the same time, it's seems like there's just like they're always creating like rules and regulations around stuff, and it gets kind of to the point to where it's almost as if you can't make your own decision. Like it's kind of like you just took away from being able to make the decision. Like,
right,
hey, let's maybe allow it, but like let people know, like, hey, this is what could probably happen, and like kind of allowing people to make their decision with their own life. Like you were saying, you can get in a car and go 80 on the highway, but
it's a little bit of a nanny state.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think there's kind of the same thing around like meat processing and that sort of thing as well. If you want to buy it in a grocery store, it has to be USDA inspected. You probably know our local processor here.
Mm-hmm.
When they do bacterial loads, the USDA will test for bacteria and things like that. Well, when you go into a facility that's killing 1,000 head a day, there's bacteria everywhere, and it's just because of the process. The way, it's not a surgical process. You can't break down that many animals that quick and have it be that clean. Well, the gentleman here locally told me, they had the USDA inspector come in and they test for it, and he's like, there's like nothing there. Like, yeah, we do it one at a time. Like that we sanitize between every animal. If they have a capacity of like 3 a day. There's even if one animal is infected, it's going to get cleaned out in between them, and it's not going to get spread to any of the other meat. So I think that again, kind of that industrialization has really been a detriment to our food supply, and I'm thrilled to have these guys here in town. I've got a couple sheep. We've gotten some pork, some beef as well through them, and I think it's all going to be higher quality than what you're getting off, your typical grocery store shelf. So
yeah, that's what it tastes better, and especially with like the steaks, it seems like a lot less gristly. It was less gristly.
Yeah,
just whatever it is that's in regular grocery store bought food. Seems like there's less of whatever it is.
Yeah, I think I got like the best ribeye I've ever had from them.
Yeah.
Better than any restaurant ribeye I've ever had, and it was $11 a pound or whatever, not a $40 steak.
Yeah, and that's what's super interesting to me is like anytime I've ever gone to a restaurant and gotten a steak, I've never really cared for it. Like it's been alright, or there's like it has good flavor, but it's because they put a bunch of teriyaki sauce and a bunch of seasonings and everything else to make it taste good, and like it's never like the same quality as buying it from the local butcher or somebody that you know.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that is in processing and handling. I think most everything here is probably aged at least 2 weeks for the beef anyway. And I don't know if they are aging any of the stuff that's coming down through the industrial system, if it's being aged at all, other than when they ship it from one facility to another and break it down again.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of switching up gears here. I see, obviously you have a pretty nice collection of whiskey. What originally got you started in wanting to collect them?
Yeah, someone else was asking me about this here earlier this week, and as indulgent as this looks, and obviously it is, this is actually the result of probably about 12 or 13 years of collecting. That's how I make myself feel better
Yeah.
spending so much on whiskey is because I spread it out over 13 years. But I have a really good friend. He's a pharmacist also down in Wichita, and he was kind of the person who got me started. I've always kind of enjoyed whiskey, but it wasn't kind of my always go-to, and I've even still kind of gone in phases. There's some cognac and wine, port wine. I was into port wine pretty heavy for a while, in and out of beer as well. But yeah, really getting together with my buddy and kind of just starting to. It was kind of like right as the bourbon craze was starting to happen, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of hunt out the unique bottles and kind of try them all and kind of get a good feel for the different mash bills and what the different grains taste like, whether it's malt or rye or wheat or something else entirely, or the wood that they're aging it in. I don't know. I really kind of enjoy that, just kind of getting to experience the different flavors that are in bourbon, Scotch, Japanese whiskey.
Yeah, and me personally, like growing up, I just seen it as like it was like a tool to have fun with your friends instead of like actually knowing anything about it. And once you kind of like collect a few bottles, you're like, what even makes a good whiskey? So then like you'll watch some YouTube videos, and there's like insane amount of history. Like we had the Prohibition and everything, years ago, and but like some companies were able to like still make it and use it and sell it as medicine, and there's actually like a lot of American history just behind like simply whiskey.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool, especially like the process of how it all is done, and like the different like how you age it, what kind of barrel it's in, and just like the process. And I don't know, to me it's kind of fascinating. Like once you get into it, there's like a whole, it's like you unlocked a whole nother thing of life that you didn't even know. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you mentioned the prescription thing. So my wife and I are obviously both pharmacists. For my graduation present from pharmacy school, my wife got me like a Prohibition era prescription for whiskey that was dated on New Year's Eve. So,
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I thought that was that's kind of awesome. Like that person obviously had a malady that couldn't wait until after the New Year.
And it, like, I guess I was probably in 8th or 9th grade, but like kind of seemed like a new era with that, with marijuana or weed, when Colorado legalized it. So that like that was kind of like awkward, not awkward, but like interesting and weird for me to like kind of go through school. Like we have the dare class, and then all of a sudden there's a state that's like known for now being able to sell what we've been told is like bad for you. And so it was, to me it was interesting because it's like, well, if it's bad for you, then like we're kind of taught like it should be illegal. Yeah. So it was like kind of a like you kind of learn to like kind of question things when you see stuff like that. And then like when you learn history, like the Prohibition period, it was like it's like a fine funny line that you kind of walk across. But
yeah, I think one of the there's a great distillery up in Kansas City called Tom's Town, and if you ever get the chance, you should do their tour. But Tom was like kind of running the city, and basically from the tour anyway, they make you believe that the Prohibition just didn't exist in Kansas City. There was always whiskey in Kansas City, and it was because partially because Tom was, either paying off the cops, paying off public officials, and so he had a market for his stuff, and everybody was having fun. No one really cared. I think there's probably examples of that. Actually, there's a fantastic local example when smoking got banned.
Hmm.
Within the state of Kansas, you're no longer allowed to smoke indoors anywhere, right? I think there's the only exceptions are like cigar bars now. Like that's the only place where you can smoke indoors. But there was a bar that was just like the owner was like, "I'm a smoker. I'm gonna smoke in here. It's my place." And so like we were there one night, and frankly we didn't go back very much because we don't like being surrounded by smoke. But we were there, and the cops were in there smoking
Yeah.
with the bar owner. I was like, I don't know, kind of going back to your raw milk argument, like people know what they're doing. They know what the risks are. We as consumers were like, hey, we don't like this. We're not going to come back. But if you and the police officers want to go smoke in here, fantastic. I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
I think that you kind of touched on that too with like the marijuana. I think there's people who make the argument that alcohol is worse than marijuana will ever be. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's an argument that's made. But yeah, I think when you as a young person hear that marijuana is bad, or you know pick a drug, um, and then you see like, oh well, Colorado says it's okay for adults to do this, Oregon says it's okay, New York State, California, and now it's, what is it, like 46 states I think have some
Yeah, I
type
think
of
there's like 7 or 8 left, and Kansas is one of them. That's like,
yes, Kansas will be the last holdout for sure.
yeah,
And so yeah, it does kind of create that like a dissonance where what you believe or what you think you believe and what you hear are different. And so I think that's good for I think it's good for young people to kind of have that thought process. I don't think it's good for young people to smoke marijuana, but I do
yeah,
think that
yeah.
it's good to kind of, like you touched on before, kind of just question, what's the why.
Well, and I've always been a person that's always like wondered why. Like even like of course all kids will be like, well, why? Like if you tell a kid something, they're like, well, why? And like
Because I said so.
I've always held on to that ever since I was a kid. I've always questioned like everything. Like, well, why does it have to be that way? And I think it's kind of good to almost kind of keep that, because if you just go with like what you're being told all the time, then it's like, well, you don't know if like what you're being told is real, true, or if it is actually even like that. But
Probably good examples of both. There's some
yeah,
things that are hard and fast truths, and there's others that are just
yeah, 100%. It doesn't. I don't think
yeah.
it applies to everything exactly, but
Yeah.
I think there, as in, like if I self-analyze like like my morning routine or something, and it takes me 30 minutes, well, why does it take me 30 minutes? Maybe I can make that 20 minutes. Or, well, why does it take me 5 minutes to take a shower? Like when I was going back to like losing weight, I was like super super self-analyzing like everything. Like I'd write down everything, how long it took me, like down to where now I only brush my teeth in the shower because it shaves off like 2 minutes of me being in the bathroom. That's 2 minutes faster getting to whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish in life, and that carries momentum to each and everything else that you do. So like, got in the car 2 minutes faster, got to work 2 minutes quicker, got this done 2 minutes faster. And if you keep applying that to like multiple different things, like you realize that you actually do have more time throughout the day. But it's just a matter of like, well, if you get out of bed 30 minutes before work, and then you're like, oh, I gotta get this, gotta get this, gotta get this done, and it's like, you're like, man, I'm always having to try and do something, versus like get up an hour before work, get a little bit of a jog in or something, take the cold shower, and eat your breakfast, while you're doing this or doing that. You realize like, oh, I could actually get more done, or maybe have more time for whatever it is that you're wanting to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's something I could work on, frankly. I think probably one of the biggest enemies for most people I'm gonna interrupt my phone again. Are these devices? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you can distract yourself endlessly. I mean, there's no shortage of content. to amuse yourself with and distract yourself from what's important with those
Yeah.
devices.
Yeah, like one of my friends, for instance, he was telling me how he's always having like a hard time trying to find time to do things. Like, well, what is that you do with your time? So like we're going through like all the stuff he does during a day, and I'm like adding it up, and I'm like, you still got like 4 or 5 hours here. Like, where is this time at?
Check your phone.
Where is it going? And he's like, well, I don't know, maybe sleep or something. I'm like, no, we already calculated how much you're sleeping. So I'm like, screenshot your screen time and send it to me. And it's like, yeah, like 6 hours on the phone. I'm like, what are you doing 6 hours on the phone? Like, it's not like he's, works on his phone or has calls that like he has to make for work or anything. So it's like, you're probably watching TikTok or just
yeah,
playing games or whatever. So like people don't even realize how much time they actually spend on some things, and when they look at it, they're like, wow.
What's amazing to me is how much time people spend on their phones while they're at a stoplight.
Yeah.
There's one particular intersection where I feel like no matter what, when I stop there, like I look over and someone's, before before they've even like come to a complete stop, they're already on their phone.
Yeah, it's like they're instantly.
Yeah, it's a reflex. It's wild.
What's one thing? We've almost become like second nature with technology. So like when first phones were like touchscreen and everything, people were like texting and driving, people were like wrecking their cars and everything. But now it's like, of course, there's a lot more going on in the world and more information just being uploaded all the time, but you don't really hear about that anymore, like as that often. It's like,
it was funny. I think Kansas was one of the ones that banned that, and they basically what they showed is that people got into more wrecks because instead of texting, now that it's illegal, they text down here, and their eyes are further from the road. There's actually more accidents by making texting illegal than there was when it was just a really bad idea.
Yeah, and that's what I see. Humans always find a way to still do what they want to do.
Yeah, I think like I don't know if the technology is better, but like the voice to text and things like that, I think are arguably safer. But
yeah,
and then the cars are driving themselves too, so that helps.
yeah. Must have been probably a pretty cool idea to be like, well, we can't control people to not text and drive, so we'll just allow the cars to drive themselves.
Yeah. That's a good idea. I think most of the cars, I don't know if it's the law now, most of the cars that I've driven, the newer cars that I've driven recently, have like automatic braking. And like, it kind of like freaks you out. I was just like parking. And I was like backing into a parking space in between two cars, and like the car slammed on the brakes.
Well, that was one thing one day, and I didn't even know that like my wife's car had it. That has like an automatic brake thing, and I'm going down the highway, and I was coming up on this car, but I was letting this other one kind of pass. So I guess got too close to the other vehicle, and it didn't like it, and it literally like jolted and flashed the red light that's up by the dash, and like I didn't even know that was in the car, and I'm like, what the heck? Like it freaked me out. I was like, we're gonna die. But it was like super funny to see, like just experience that. I don't know, it's funny.
Yeah, I had what was it? I had a rental car somewhere, and it had one of the lane keep deals. I don't know if you've ever driven in these. But I kept on feeling like the car was like swerving. Like I was like, what's going on? But then I noticed it was like when I go past an exit ramp, it was trying to follow that solid line off the side. It just totally freaked me out.
Yeah, and that's what I find it very funny because I'm in like the perfect. I feel like I've kind of grown up in like the perfect time to see like how life kind of used to be, and hearing like my great grandparents talk about how the world was, and then seeing kids nowadays. And like I grew up to where like technology was kind of first coming out, where like you got the old like Apple computer that weighs 50 pounds when you go to pick it up with the clacky keyboards, to now like there's like digital keyboards where you're not even actually touching keys, it's just sensing touch. And like how we went from cars being carbureted and no electronics to now there's fully electronic cars, and the argument between this era and this new age stuff, there's like this fight between like new age and old ways, and I think it's good to have just like a mix of both for people. Like if you want an electric car, have an electric car. If you don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This is reminds me of a funny story. I was over at a friend's house. We have a hybrid. It's a Hyundai Sonata hybrid, and I was over at my buddy's house, and I pulled up and he didn't really see me, so I was trying to be a jerk, and I had the car in park or whatever, and I tried to like rev it up. Doesn't do anything because it's not really gas. It's just the accelerator. I was kind of like, oh, this is a strange spaceship.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's super interesting to ride in like a Tesla or like an electric car, because like you can just press the pedal and there's like you don't feel the rumble of the engine, the vibrations, or the noise coming from the exhaust or anything. It just you're like 0 to 60 like in like no time, and there's like no sound to it. It's just like
pretty wild.
It's almost like weird. You're like, that was weird almost, but it was like super cool, so you want to keep doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like interesting to see like solar, for instance. When you talk to a younger person about solar, like they understand the concept of it as of like how it can be good. And I'd say a lot of people that are like older, they knew like the old solar for when it first came out, and they had to deal with all the batteries, and like it wasn't really fine tuned yet to where like you're getting like the optimal amount of sunlight from a panel. So like it wasn't really worth the money in the beginning, but like following that process though, like now it's like you can almost, get like, I don't know, 80% of your energy and not have to pay as much on electric. Or
yeah, I think the solar obviously still needs some storage. I mean, so whether that is the grid or like, in our example, like our neighbors are using it, right? If we have an overproduction, it's going to go onto the grid, and our neighbors are going to use it, and then they're just going to produce less at the plant. But I do think that there's probably a solution. I think that obviously energy storage is starting to get cheaper too. So it'll be interesting to see what we can do with renewable energy and what that does for the planet.
yeah, and then what's like super funny is like the very same people that will say like we want to have a good healthy like earth and life for everybody will also be like wind energy is stupid, because like when it's cold or when the wind's not blowing, so they'll like find a way to like try to rationalize like why we shouldn't have it, but at the same time they're like, well, we want lower prices or want this or want that, but then like they just see like one negative about something, and like not, it seems like people always try to find a reason like why not to have something or why not do something. And actually lately, like I don't know like what's going on, but I've been seeing like a bunch of signs around town about has like the cross through the wind turbine thing.
Yeah, so the same group that has the wind farm in northern Marion County has a project planned for southern Dickinson County, is my understanding. I don't know what the timeline is on that, but that's coming up here pretty soon.
Yeah, and that, to me, I don't really see like a negative to wind energy.
I mean, there are negatives. I think one of the biggest ones is just what happens when you decommission them. If you've probably seen some of the photos of like the graveyards for the blades. So once those blades break or whatever, there's not a good recycling program or way to reuse those.
There was actually a new company that recently came out like this year, like in 2024, that started recycling those. So they like they throw it pretty much in like a giant muncher and it shreds them, and then they like, I think it's like blocks or something that they make. I can't remember the exact product, but they're making like things to build out of them, and like like recycle it, like melt it down and stuff like that. So I didn't even know that that was an issue until like
Yeah.
I watched a video on it, and
I definitely want to check out their giant muncher.
yeah, it looks pretty cool. But yeah, it's almost like a I don't know. I always see like those satisfying videos where they throw like a water bottle
Car
or something.
engines
And
or
just,
whatever, yeah.
yeah,
Just like,
yeah. It's interesting how the human mind can be so interested in like watching something like that,
yeah, I think that,
like the attraction to it.
well, I think we just like crave uniqueness, right? So if it's something your brain has never seen before, it's like, there's kind of some intrigue, like, what the heck is that?
Yeah,
And then kind of with the munchers, like, then you're like, what else can you put in there? I feel like there's kind of a good rabbit hole to go down. Like,
yeah.
what else can this eat?
With the kind of back to the pharmaceutical stuff, we've seen a huge influx of like fentanyl coming across the border, and there being a lot more people either getting sick or dying from it. And like, do you see that affecting the pharmaceutical side of things at all, or like, do you guys see anything from that from your guys' point of view, or?
That's a great question. I would say that at least where we're at geographically, we don't see very much of it. But I mean, obviously there's still issues with that here locally. I mean, whether it's usually it's counterfeit pills that, from what I understand, look like oxycodone or something, but then they have fentanyl in them, which, in the correct dose, you might not be able to tell the difference therapeutically, but typically it's, done using poor manufacturing. And so a little bit of variation in fentanyl can be the difference between pain relief and death. So I would say we're not really too exposed to that from the professional side, but certainly within our communities, there's people who've been affected by, let's say, drugs or things that were laced with fentanyl.
Yeah. And is there a difference between like the fentanyl that's like getting shipped here and the fentanyl that's like used in like the actual medical field?
I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I assume that, fentanyl as a molecule is not terribly complex. So again, I don't know if there's different ways to manufacture it, if there's other things that are being like created when they make the fentanyl. Are there like things that are also bad for you in there? I'm not sure, but fentanyl as it is deadly enough, right? If you had basically enough fentanyl that you could see it on your hand, it could kill you.
Yeah.
So it's crazy potent.
And that's what's like pretty crazy in my eyes, is like something as small as like not even a pebble,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, just being able to barely even see it on your hand, and then that can kill you. Like something so small and like would look like a dust particle or something.
Yeah.
You accidentally ingest it, and you're no longer here. It's
Pretty
pretty
wild.
profound.
Yep.
What do you kind of worry about with this upcoming year being an election year?
I don't really worry about much. I don't know how well you know me, but
Yeah.
I feel like there's, I don't know. I kind of try to focus my energy on what's actually happening, not what could happen. And so I assume we'll either have a different president or we'll have the same president.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna, operate in the environment that the country chooses for us, I guess. What about you? What are your concerns?
I mean, I have kind of like mixed views on it. So there's like the side of me that, especially with like my social media and with how I talk to people, is like, yeah, we could look at it in the form of, well, if we get this president, like things would be better.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of I don't like to look at things that way, because it's kind of like this
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy, like you've already like made up the decision how it's going to end.
yeah, like you're giving something else the power, as in like you were saying, like operate in the like field that you're in, like just taking self accountability. Like, yeah, we can all admit that the economy is crap. Like literally 3 years ago, I used to buy like a bag of chopped up chicken that's already pre cooked and everything for like $6 and some cents. Now that same bag of chicken is $12 and some cents, literally doubled. I could complain about that and be mad about it, or I could just focus on what I could do about myself.
You start raising chickens.
Start raising chickens, yeah. Start a chicken farm. It'd be cheaper. But or I can just focus on, hey, accept the fact that I can't control the economy, make more money, and become more successful, help people along the way of what I've learned, and hopefully they can do the same for them, and not complain about the economy. I don't know. It's kind of
You mostly just want people to stop complaining.
yeah. I don't
Stop
know.
making excuses. Quit complaining.
Once I like learn the other side of like how to look at things, it's like I don't know. Do you know Kanye West?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
He has a song and it's called "Can't Tell Me Nothing."
Okay.
It's a pretty good song. If you haven't heard of it,
Do you want to sing it for us? Or?
no,
Okay.
not that lyrical. But it's kind of like "Can't Tell Me Nothing" in a way. Being like everyone's always got an excuse for anything and everything. It seems like, and I'm fallen into that myself. It's like, yeah, I should have just gotten up earlier instead of being like, oh, I was kind of tired. Does it really matter if you're tired? No, not really, because that's you being tired. It doesn't really matter. You either get it done or you don't.
Yeah.
You can say that you're tired, or you can just accept the fact, like, hey, I'm tired, but I still gotta get this done. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What's one thing in real estate that you've heard from other people that aren't in real estate that it's kind of like, well, that's not really how it works?
It's I would say real estate adjacent, but I think one of the things that most people don't understand is how interest works. Like when people say, "Oh, I got my mortgage and all I'm doing is paying interest," like I think that's just kind of really a failing of the educational system in that they don't understand how math or interest or anything like that works. So that's one of the things I think is the most, I would say, problematic.
Yeah. Like the saying, you date the rate, but you marry the mortgage.
Tell me about that. I'm not familiar with that.
Well, like if it's something that I heard from someone, I can't remember who exactly it was, but if of course they're kind of like too big to fail almost.
Mm-hmm.
But if you buy something at a market where the rates are higher, but then
Gotcha.
a few years later it's not, then you
Right. So like easy math, right? Like so when we were in like peak pandemic, interest rates were 2% for a 15-year mortgage. Now they're 6%.
Yeah.
So to make the math easy, if you're buying a $100,000 home, 2% interest is $2,000 a year.
Yeah.
6% interest is $6,000 a year. So your payment difference is almost $400 a month. So I hear what you're saying. Like so, I think the challenge though is that risk is, I think people were projecting real interest rates to go down even already, but they haven't yet, and so you might only be dating, but she may stick around longer than you want her to.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I do agree, and everything's risky. Like not going to the gym is risky. You're probably eventually gonna get overweight, and like that affects your health. Or some people would be like, if I go to the gym, like my body's gonna hurt. Like, yeah, there's a risk where you could potentially get hurt, but
yeah, I think I hear what you're saying there. I think I don't know. I've kind of been contemplating health and nutrition, and I feel like the gym can obviously do good things for you. Don't get me wrong, and I think people need a certain type of exercise, but I also think that you should be able to manage weight, I would say almost exclusively with diet. What are your thoughts on that? I'm still kind of putting this. I think there's a certain level of activity that needs to happen, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, lifting heavy weights. Which obviously, if you want to get stronger, that's something you can do, and that's a tool. Or if you want to be able to run long distances, there's really only one way to do that. That's practice it.
Yeah.
But I think if you're just looking at weight, my thought is that it should be entirely diet based if that's your only goal.
Yeah. I agree, but I also I see it so much from my point of view where if I don't go to the gym that day, I'm like, man, something's off. I can just simply feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Versus when I go in the gym, it's especially when I go in the morning, and it's something, and I kind of exert myself, or I just really push myself. It's instead of just running like a knife through I don't know how exactly the grit of a knife sharpener is, but it's running it through 80 grit versus 800 grit. It's that extra fine edge, and I can realize just that extra little percentage. It's man, that really carried me through the day where I just feel that much better. But that amount of energy carries into each and everything I do.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the whole brush my teeth in the shower, so I got to that much faster, and it just carries on to everything else. And I feel like everyone should have something that they really try to push themselves in. When I was first going and trying to lose weight, it was hard for me to even just consistently go to the gym. I'm just I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I eventually got to where I'm I love going to the gym, love lifting weights, and love pushing myself in it.
Yeah.
So I pushed myself in it, but I wasn't getting that mental sharpness where it's oh, this is hard, because I'm enjoying it now.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I was I could probably do some cardio. So then I'd hop on the treadmill, kind of push myself. I'm oh, I feel that little fine edge again. So there's always something that I feel that whatever level that someone's at, there's something that they should always try to strive to really push themselves in that they don't like doing.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I guess my hypothesis is kind of homeostasis based. So I think that exercise is just about the only way to deal with stressful situations. And so if you are experiencing a lot of stress, whether it's work or relationship or family, I feel like there needs to be a way to address that stress. I think exercise is just about the only healthy way to do that. And I'm curious. I'm just something you said there too. There's a little bit about that routine too. So your body's used to feeling that high, that endorphin rush from exercising. And I'm curious, if you were to taper off. I know that feeling you're talking about, where you feel almost like your fingers are going to explode, right?
Yeah.
You have that kind of that need for that release from exercise. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's something we should look into more.
Yeah. The second day I'd ever been around you. So the first day I met you and your wife, we just got to know each other and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the second day, or second time that I'd come over to talk to you, you're want to go ride bikes? And I was yeah, sure. And you're we'll go around this section. And then by the end of it, I think we had gone, it was 18 miles or something.
Yeah, that sounds right. I remember you not being able to walk for 2 days after that.
Yeah, I was so sore. I had never gone that far physically any time ever in my entire life. So I was I think I'm dying. It was so hard to walk the next day. I didn't realize just riding my bike would be ever that excruciating. But it was pretty cool though, because I was it's hard, but it wasn't so hard where it was I can't do this. So I don't know. And you just kept going, and I'm I have no choice. No one's gonna come pick me up with the trucks. I was I gotta just continue to ride. And then there was that one hill towards the end where I couldn't ride up the hill anymore, so I got off and just started like walking my bike, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But like by the end of it, I was like, it was like probably one of the coolest experiences though, because I was like, I didn't even know I could push myself to like do that, considering I had never ridden that far.
It's pretty wild.
Even though like most people that like ride distance on bikes, 18 miles doesn't seem like far, but to someone that's never ridden more than probably a mile and a half or two is like, it's like a super extreme.
Yeah.
But like last year, I ran my first 10K. I didn't even know how long a 10K was. Literally, I'm standing there and
we did it together.
Well, no, my first one was in Manhattan.
Oh, okay.
At the Aggieville one that they had, St. Patrick's Day.
Okay. Okay. And then we did the Eisenhower together like a month or so later.
Yeah. But I got in there, and then there was some guy talking to me, and he's like, well, how many have you done? And I was like, oh, this is my first one. He's like, oh, are you excited? I was like, yeah, I guess. And he's like, well, you don't seem that excited about it. I was like, well, yeah, like how long does this thing like last? He's like, well, what do you mean like last? It just depends on your pace. And I was like, well, like how long is the distance? He's like 10K. I was like, well, how long is a 10K though?
It's 10 kilometers, man.
Yeah, I'd never done it before. I signed up like 2 or 3 days before. I was just like, I'm gonna do it. But that was an experience too, because.
Had you prepared for it for your first one?
No. No.
Did you run the whole thing?
Yeah, I kept a pretty good steady pace. There was like 2 or 3 times where I walked.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I didn't walk in the Eisenhower at all though.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, the very first one, I was like, my legs hurt so bad. Like like right here, and the muscles right above my knee were cramping so bad that like I couldn't bend my leg, but I couldn't straighten my leg out. So I was like, I can't walk, but I can't run. So I just had like this weird shuffle, and it hurts so bad. But I was like, I didn't think I was gonna be able to make it because I had like 2 blocks left. Like I could see the finish line thing, and literally my legs started cramping up so bad. I'm like, am I gonna have to go to the hospital? Like, like my legs were not working right, but. I had probably the worst shoes. Yeah, I had like the worst shoes to probably run in.
Cowboy boots or.
They were like some tennis shoes, but like the soles on them were like super hard, and I just wasn't in the shape to be like running at all either. But did it.
Good work.
So. Did you do that run a month or 2 ago?
Which one was that?
It's like the 100-mile or something like that.
I didn't. The event that I've got coming up is a 48-hour, so it'll be it's like Earth Day weekend, 20th of April, give or take. So it goes from Friday to Sunday. So, yeah, I did that last year. That was my first ultra I did. There's kind of some family scheduling things, so I was really only able to participate for about 12 hours, but I was able to do 50 miles, 51 miles, I think, is what it ended up being. So my goal is just to go all 48 hours. This year I was in pretty rough shape after 12 last time around, so got a little bit better training schedule. One of the biggest things I probably still have, you can see my toes here, had a couple of toenails that got a little gross and got kind of blisters all over my feet, but I've got some strategies to address that this year. So
what was the mentality like going through that at the time?
I mean, I guess I really get into my head when I'm exercising solo, and I'm just kind of allows me to process things that are going on. And so that's really all it was. I was just like walking and thinking. That was kind of my strategy for the whole thing, was never to run unless there was a camera. The only time that I ran. But I got a pretty fast pace. Like I walk at somewhere around like almost 4.5 miles an hour. And I just kind of did the math, right? If I've got 48 hours, if I can do that for 4 miles an hour, 4.2. The goal is to get 200 miles in 48 hours. So it's kind of crazy. That's basically like walking the length of Kansas from north to south. So pretty wild.
Yeah, that's a. I'm not gonna say I would never do an ultra, but it's like the. I feel like I should do a marathon first.
I don't know. Maybe. I've never done a marathon.
Yeah.
But I also wasn't running, so I feel like that's probably a little bit different. Maybe walk a marathon.
Yeah. There's definitely I don't know. I feel like the mind, we really hold ourselves back from doing a lot of things. Like the instance, like the whole bike ride thing. You were like, yeah, we'll go around the section. And then you were like, you want to keep going? I was like, sure. And it was like this whole like voice in my head. I'm like,
no, I really don't.
I'm like, I can't. I was like, I can't let this guy know that I'm not willing to keep going. So you kept asking me at like each intersection. You're like, want to keep going? I was like, yeah. Even though I was like, I want to go home.
Every mile that way is an extra mile.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I was like, I think I might just die on this trip. This might be my last bike ride ever. I don't know why, but I was just like I can't stop. Like, gotta keep going. And I don't know. I've never pushed myself like that quite like that hard, but I was like, I don't have a choice. Like, what am I gonna do? Stand here and wait for him to go get a truck and then come back and pick me up because I quit riding my bike. So I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. So I just kept going, and it's like maybe I could do an ultra. Probably could. I mean, physically could. Mentally, I think that's why I like to dive into like the mental aspects of like really pushing yourself, because I think most humans can do so much more than like what we think we can, because like the person that thinks they can and the person that thinks they can't are both correct. Like if you don't think that you can do something, chances are you're probably never going to be able to do it because you don't think you even can to begin with.
I kind of feel like I bring that up. Like I've seen that even just on like a smaller level. Like when you go into a bike ride, you generally know how far you're going to go. Right? You're going to ride 50 miles. You're going to ride 100 miles, 200 miles, and you have your mindset ready for whatever it is that you know you're going to do. And so if you have a surprise, you know, I think I've only had a few of them. Like usually it's weather related. So like, okay, you're going to do 100 miles. Okay, well now you're going to do 100 miles in the pouring rain, and it's 40 degrees out. Like you're like, oh, I was ready to do 100 miles. I was not ready to do 100 miles, you know, in the pouring rain. So I feel like there's your mind kind of prepares you for something, and even if you know what you're going to do, it's probably not going to be prepared for more than that. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It's kind of self-limiting.
Yeah,
like you limit yourself to being like you get almost like a picture in your head of like this is how it's going to be. Just like I can't remember who it was, but I heard them speaking on skydiving. Never gone skydiving before, but the night before they're like picturing it and they're freaking out in their bed. They're like super anxious and like they're literally just laying in their bed, but they're thinking about skydiving and it's freaking them out. And I had like my own similar situation like that when I was a kid. I went to a church camp in Colorado, and on top of this mountain, like we were given options of like things that we could do, like whitewater rafting and then like swimming and zip lining and a mountain walk and some other things. But those were the four that I picked, and one of them was zip lining. Well, I didn't know that we had to climb this 100-foot rock wall. And I'm like looking at this thing and like it looked cool, super cool. I'm climbing it, no issues, like got a rope and everything and harness and everything. We get to the top of this platform and it's like 4 giant telephone poles pretty much, with a platform on top of it, and you can feel the wind moving it. And instantly it was like my heart just dropped and sunk, and like this lady had locked on the little zip line thing, and I'm like, I can't move. Like I was literally like frozen in place, like deathly terrified. And she's like, well, you can't go back down and the ropes don't go that way. And I was like, well then I'm just gonna stand here. I literally cannot move. Like you're gonna have to figure something out. And she's like, well, you have to go off on the zip line. I was like, nope, that's not happening. I was like, you're gonna have to push me. She's like, well, you'll have to like kind of get to the edge. So I like barely sat on the edge, like, no, because I'm terrified. And it goes over this big canyon where it's like way, way,
Legit,
way
yeah.
down. Because you start at like one top of a mountain, you kind of go to like the side of another one.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a lake and everything that you go over, and I'm like deathly terrified. And when she shoved me off there, like the like split second of the slack,
Uh-huh. You're just
I
like
was
you're
like,
dead
I
there.
literally, I thought my heart stopped, like it hurt almost. And then once I started going, like I heard it, and
Can look around like,
like
oh,
I
I'm still
finally
alive.
opened up my eyes and I'm like, all right, this is actually pretty cool. And like, it was like this like moment, like it's so funny how our brains can create such a fear of something where like our mind is so in control that we can't move, which is pretty funny. So it's like this self-limiting like that's how strong our minds are. And that's why I like really like to study how hard we can really push ourselves and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when someone's like, I can't do that, I'm like, yeah, you can. You don't want to.
I can't wait for you to have kids.
Yeah, they're gonna have a tough life.
It's funny.
But I feel like if you create like the right environment around them and the kids always see you pushing yourself, that gives them that extra like energy or ability to be able to do that. If they like if your kids kind of see you as a hero and like look up to you doing stuff, it's like, you know, like my dad's my hero, like
It's pretty cool.
it's pretty cool. And I think that that's kind of like what parents should strive for, because I don't know. I think it would. I think it's probably like the best thing you can probably try to do as a parent is like be your kid's hero in like a positive way, I guess. Because I mean, you could be like a villain, but
Yeah, there's probably a spectrum, kind of depending on the day.
yeah,
I kind of feel like my first job is to be their parent,
yeah,
and I feel like sometimes I might look like you might look like a villain. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, kids shouldn't get everything they want. Right?
yeah,
There's no question that's not good for anybody, kids or adults, either one. But yeah, that's something that challenge.
yeah, yeah. Especially with like guys in particular, I think that like boys should have it harder than girls, just because like when you see a guy that just had like a super easy going life, they tend to not really do much.
Yeah, there's kind of been like a societal shift in that where I feel like maybe I don't know. There's definitely been more focus on women, and I feel like in some cases maybe especially this like most recent generation of like high school grads have kind of fallen behind, like where they don't feel important. Um, the boys don't. So I don't know if that's reality. There's obviously plenty of examples where that's not the case, but um, kids are hard.
Yeah,
and they're important.
yeah, it's super interesting to see, especially nowadays, where like guys get upset at females for expecting the meal to be paid for, or for them to get this or have that, and like guys will complain about that, and to me it's kind of funny because it's like, aren't you the man? Like, kind of supposed to do that, and it seems like maybe people just had it too easy per se, or they've had it hard in different ways, or raised differently. But like my point of view is like the guy is supposed to kind of take care of everything. I mean, I'm not saying it has to be the way, but for me personally, like that's kind of how I like it.
I kind of feel like you just need, I mean, from my perspective, you just need to have aligned expectations. You know what I mean? But yeah, I just think, having those expectations of someone, if it's your expectation that you're going to pay for someone and you go on a date with somebody and it's their expectation that they're going to pay for themselves, like, well, you've got this the expectations aren't aligned, and I think that's kind of where you have discomfort or unhappiness, or like just whatever it is. I mean, I think you could, yeah. I just think that whether it's dating, marriage, even parenting, just making sure those expectations are clear and aligned.
Yeah. I just see like the super big like influx of like guys. It seems especially like around my age, of like wanting the relationship to be like a 50-50 type deal, and realizing like the mother nature and the fatherhood nature are kind of different as of like how society is nowadays. So it's almost like this fight between like how we kind of naturally want to do things and how society's kind of like taught us to do things.
So
Like,
nature and nurture.
yeah, so like I kind of, me personally, and then if people have different relationships than this view, then that's for them. And if it works for them, that's cool. I don't, whatever. I don't have any ill feeling towards it. But like for me personally, it's kind of like I want someone that's like a motherly type that takes care of stuff at home, because like that's kind of a job in itself. Like especially if you have kids, like that's a lot to deal with. Like kids in themselves, it's almost kind of like a job in a way. Like it's a lot to take care of, clean the house, cook, all that stuff, and then the guy kind of brings the bread home and takes care of all the financials and stuff. And me personally, I like that. I kind of like a woman to be kind of more dependent upon me versus it's like, well, I want you, to work as well and pay half these bills.
Yeah, again, I just go back to expectations. I think there's all sorts of different relationships that work out. Just making sure everybody's on the same page as far as what those expectations are and who does what when. And
yeah. It's, I don't know, society is an interesting organism.
It is.
It's like a big beehive. Everything has a playing part, and when someone from this side of the hive says this is how it is, then the other side of the hive is like, no, it's not. So it's like this war, but it's like, well, yeah, it applies to this person's life and it works perfectly for their life, but for these other people, like it doesn't apply and it doesn't work. So there's like this constant like debate and argue between so many things in like society or just like life in general. You got anything else you want to talk about?
No, we covered a lot of ground today.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, thank you all for watching, and I'll be uploading more podcasts in the near future. So just stay tuned, like and subscribe, and thank you all for watching. See ya.